All right. So are you ready to dive into a case that's honestly one of the most fascinating I've seen in a while?
Oh, yeah.
It's the disappearance and murder of Nina Reiser.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
Well, that's just it.
Oh.
It's anything but straightforward.
I,
The twists and turns will have you hooked from the very beginning.
I'm intrigued already.
So to unpack this one, we've got excerpts from a 48 Hours episode about the case.
I love that show.
Me
It
too.
always gets into the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah, and they really explore all sides in the story.
That's so important,
It is.
especially in a case like this,
Mm-hmm.
where things are not always what they seem.
Exactly. So we're going to get into all that, but first, let's set the stage.
Sounds good.
We've got Hans Reiser,
Yeah?
a brilliant computer programmer, and honestly, a bit of a tech world legend.
I know his name from somewhere.
Yeah, he's known for his work on the Linux operating system.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, so we've got Hans, and then we've got Nina Reiser, who was a Russian OBGYN.
An interesting pair.
You would think they met through work or maybe mutual friends, but
Right.
their story starts in a pretty unexpected place.
Really? Where?
A Russian Bride magazine.
Wow. That's not your typical love story.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So, right off the bat, we're dealing with a very unconventional relationship.
Definitely. And it makes you wonder what Hans was really looking for in a wife.
Right. It wasn't just about finding love. It
Okay.
seems like he had a very specific vision.
And we actually get some insight into that from his best friend, Shawn Sturgeon.
This is going to be good.
Oh, yeah. Shawn described Hans's ideal partner as a, quote, a beautiful, well-educated professional woman to give up everything to have my children and raise them, end quote.
Wow. That's quite the checklist.
Yeah, it sounds less like finding a partner and more like fulfilling a predetermined role.
Exactly. And this need for control, this desire for a woman to conform to his vision seems to be a recurring theme in Hans's life.
Right.
Even his own father, Ramon, had some pretty strong opinions about Nina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he called her shallow and openly disapproved of their relationship.
So there's already this clash of personalities right from the start.
Oh, absolutely. We've got Hans with his strong will and specific desires. Then we've got Nina trying to navigate this, and then Ramon lurking in the background with his disapproval.
That's a recipe for some serious family drama.
It really is, and it makes you wonder what was at the root of Ramon's disapproval.
Right. Was it just a personality clash, or was there something deeper going on?
Yeah, was it maybe cultural differences?
Possibly Nina being from Russia and Hans and Ramon being American?
Right, or maybe Ramon genuinely felt like Nina wasn't the right fit for his son.
Whatever the reason,
Yeah.
it must have added a lot of tension to an already complex relationship.
For sure, and yet, despite all this, they went ahead and got married in 1999.
Wow.
They even had 2 children together.
So you'd think that might have smoothed things over with Ramon.
Yeah.
But family dynamics are rarely that simple.
Never, and from what we learn in the 48 Hours episode, Ramon's disapproval didn't just disappear.
Right. It seems like it lingered even after the marriage and the arrival of his grandchildren.
Yeah. And that tension, that underlying unease, likely contributed to the unraveling of Hans and Nina's relationship.
Yeah, we know that Hans became increasingly consumed by his work.
Right.
He started spending more and more time in Russia.
Leaving Nina feeling isolated and alone in their Oakland home.
That's got to be tough, feeling abandoned like that.
It's no wonder cracks started to appear in their marriage.
And that's when things get even more complicated.
Oh, boy.
Enter Shawn Sturgeon, Hans's best friend.
Okay.
He starts an affair with Nina.
Hold on. This is the same Shawn who gave us that description of Hans's ideal wife.
The one and only.
And wasn't he the maid of honor at their wedding?
He was...
And full drag?
You can't make this stuff up.
It's a detail that speaks volumes about their unconventional relationships and the blurred boundaries within their social circle.
Definitely.
So we've got a strained marriage, a disapproving father, and an affair with the best friend who also happens to be the drag queen maid of honor.
This is already more drama than an episode of The Real Housewives.
And we haven't even gotten to the disappearance yet.
Oh, I can't wait. Oh, yeah, buckle up, because things are about to take a dark turn.
Okay, lay it on me.
So remember, Nina and Hans are separated now.
Right.
And in 2006, Nina just vanishes without a trace.
Like, poof, gone.
Exactly. She drops her kids off at Hans's house, and that's the last anyone sees of her.
Chilling. So what were the early clues in the investigation? What made Hans a suspect so quickly?
Well, there were a few things that immediately raised red flags for investigators.
Like what?
First, her minivan was found with groceries inside, And her cell phone was there, too.
Okay.
But the battery had been removed.
That's weird. It's not like she was just running a quick errand.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like someone was trying to prevent the phone from being tracked.
Which is exactly what someone would do if they had something to hide.
And then there was Hans's behavior.
Uh-oh.
He was evasive with the police and seemed more concerned with covering his tracks than actually finding his estranged wife.
That's not a good look.
Not at all. And he even removed the passenger seat and carpeting from his car.
Wait, seriously, why would he do that?
It's never explicitly stated in the 48 Hours episode, but it definitely suggests he was trying to hide something.
No kidding, and I'm guessing this is where the blood evidence comes in.
The police found traces of Nina's blood on a wooden post in Hans's house.
So at this point, you've got the missing person, the suspicious behavior, and the blood evidence.
Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, open and shut case.
You'd think so, but then comes a truly bizarre twist.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Shawn Sturgeon, Hans's best friend, remember the one who had the affair with Nina?
Yeah.
He steps forward and confesses to killing 8.5 people.
Whoa, 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 back up 8.5. What does that even mean?
It's a strange detail that's never fully explained. He claimed his victims were abusers from his childhood, and the half referred to someone he wasn't sure if he'd actually killed.
That's creepy. And was he implying he killed Nina?
It's unclear. But despite this confession, there was absolutely no evidence linking Shawn to Nina's murder.
So was he just trying to insert himself into the story?
It's hard to say for sure. Some people believe he might have been trying to protect Hans either consciously or subconsciously.
Interesting.
Others think he was just seeking attention or notoriety.
A bit of a strange detour in the investigation.
Definitely, it adds to the overall intrigue of the case, though.
For sure. So despite this weird interlude with Shawn, the focus of the investigation remained on Hans.
Why?
And a year after Nina vanished, his trial began.
What was the prosecution's main argument?
Well, they built their case around Hans's suspicious behavior, the blood evidence, and the fact that Nina simply vanished without a trace after being at his house.
So they were basically saying that Hans killed her and then went to great lengths to cover it up.
Exactly, driven by resentment and possibly jealousy over the affair with Shawn.
Did they have any witnesses? Anyone who actually saw something incriminating?
Well, the most compelling witness was actually Nina's son Rory, who was only 7 years old at the time.
Oh, wow.
He testified that he saw his father carrying a large bag down to the basement on the day Nina disappeared.
That must have been so difficult for a child that young to process, let alone testify about in court.
Absolutely. But the defense argued that Rory's memory was unreliable and potentially influenced by Russian psychologists who they claimed might have been coaching him.
So they were trying to discredit his testimony.
Exactly, painting him as a confused child caught in the middle of a messy divorce.
But you still got this young boy's testimony, which is both compelling and questionable.
Right, and then you have Hans maintaining his innocence throughout the whole trial.
What did the jury decide?
After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Hans guilty of first-degree murder.
Wow.
And he was sentenced to 25 years to life.
That's a huge turning point in the case. Justice seems to have been served.
You would think so, but there's one glaring loose end.
What's that?
Nina's body was never found.
Oh, right. And that lack of closure must have been agonizing for everyone involved, especially her family.
Yeah, it's one thing to intellectually understand that someone's responsible, but it's another thing entirely to have that final piece of the puzzle.
To know without a doubt what happened to her.
Exactly, that lack of closure. I can only imagine the agony Nina's family must have been going through.
Absolutely. And in this case, the path to closure takes a really unexpected turn.
Oh.
Years after his conviction, Hans makes a shocking offer.
What?
He says he'll lead the police to Nina's body in exchange for a reduced sentence.
Wow, that's a bold move.
It was a gamble for everyone involved.
How so?
Well, for Hans, it meant finally admitting to the crime he had so vehemently denied for all those years.
Right, he was basically giving up any chance of ever appealing his conviction.
Exactly, and for the prosecution, it meant potentially lessening the punishment for a convicted murderer, which is never an easy decision.
So what happened? Did they take the deal?
They did. The desire for answers for that final piece of the puzzle, it just outweighed the risks. I can understand that.
So Hans, now a convicted murderer, leads investigators to this place where he hid Nina's body.
It's a scene straight out of a movie.
It really is. There's actually video footage of it, and it's chilling to watch.
I bet.
You see Hans handcuffed, walking through these dense woods, guiding the very people who put him behind bars to his victim's final resting place.
It must have been surreal for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And it's not just any random location either. He led them to a spot just a half-mile from his own house.
Wow, talk about audacity.
It makes you wonder how he thought he could get away with it for so long.
Right. And do you remember that drawing Nina's son Rory made while he was in Russia?
The one where he depicted his father carrying a large bag down the basement stairs?
Yeah, that one.
It seemed so significant at the time, even though it was just a child's drawing.
And get this, the details of that drawing made long before Nina's body was found. They lined up with how Hans described disposing of her remains,
Seriously.
buried in a shallow grave in a bag. It's almost too eerie to be a coincidence.
Makes you think about the ways trauma can manifest, especially in children.
And how even seemingly insignificant details can hold so much meaning.
So they reach the spot in the woods and they actually find her.
They do. Hans points to this area that looks like it's been dug up and refilled, and they start digging, and there she is.
Nina Reiser buried 2 feet down in a garbage bag inside a duffel bag.
Oh my gosh.
Ah.
It's a horrifying discovery, but also a bittersweet moment of closure for Nina's family.
Finally, after years of uncertainty, they could lay her to rest.
Right. And as part of the deal, Hans confessed to strangling Nina in his house.
He claimed he'd do it because he believed Nina was harming their children to get attention.
Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Exactly. It's a very rare form of abuse where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in a child to gain attention.
It's a difficult defense to unpack.
It really is. Was it a genuine belief, a delusion fueled by stress and paranoia, or was it a calculated attempt to mitigate his sentence?
A way to control the narrative even after being convicted.
The prosecution and many who knew Nina, they strongly refuted the claim.
They insisted that she was a loving and devoted mother.
Right, so we're left with this confession, but it doesn't fully answer the question of why.
Exactly, and that's often the case with true crime.
We can examine the evidence, we can analyze the legal arguments, but ultimately we're dealing with complex individuals.
Whose motivations may never be fully understood.
After the confession, Hans was taken back to court. His verdict was reduced to second-degree murder, and he received a new sentence of 15 years to life.
It's a resolution that brings up a lot of mixed emotions.
It does. On the one hand, Nina's body was recovered, her family finally had the closure they so desperately needed, but
But some argue that the deal allowed a murderer to serve less time.
it raises complex questions about justice, about the weight of different outcomes, and about the compromises that are sometimes made in pursuit of truth and healing.
It definitely makes you think.
Even with the conviction and the confession, there are still so many unanswered questions. What was truly going on in Hans's mind? What role did Shawn Sturgeon really play in all of this? And most importantly, what could have been done to prevent this tragedy from happening in the first place?
Those are the questions that linger long after the headlines fade.
This case, like so many others, serves as a reminder that even behind seemingly ordinary lives, there can be a lot of darkness.
And it really challenges our assumptions about relationships, about the tech world, and about the very nature of truth itself.
This deep dive has been a heavy one, filled with twists and turns, betrayals, and heartbreak, but it's also been a journey into the complexities of human behavior and the enduring search for justice and closure.
It really has.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the disappearance and murder of Nina Reiser.
It's been a pleasure.
We encourage you to continue exploring this case, to seek out different perspectives, and to draw your own conclusions. And remember, even in the darkest of stories, there's always something to learn, something to ponder, something to keep the conversation going.